in the heart of a lush African village called Mokonde, where tall palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze and the sun painted everything golden, lived a pastor named Thomas. He wasn't like other pastors. He was young, barely 35, and had a special gift for healing that made people come from far and wide to seek his help. Pastor Thomas lived in a small mud house next to his church, which sat on top of a hill overlooking the entire village. Every morning, he would wake up before sunrise to ring the church bell, calling faithful villagers to morning prayers. The sound of that bell had become as natural to the villagers as the crow of roosters. But our story truly begins on a particularly strange night, when the moon was so full and bright that it looked like a giant silver coin in the sky. Pastor Thomas was getting ready for bed when he heard a knock on his door. Now, late-night visitors weren't unusual for him. People often came seeking prayers during their darkest hours. But something about this knock felt different. When he opened the door, he found an old woman he had never seen before. She was bent over a walking stick, her face hidden under a colorful head wrap, and her clothes were covered in dust as if she had traveled a very long way. "Pastor," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need your help. My granddaughter, she's dying." Thomas's heart squeezed with compassion. "Where is she?" he asked, already reaching for his Bible and prayer oil. "In the forest," the old woman replied. "She's too weak to walk. Please, you must come with me." Now, everyone in Mokonde knew it was dangerous to enter the forest at night. Strange things happened there after dark. Lights that couldn't be explained, sounds that shouldn't exist, and shadows that moved on their own. But Pastor Thomas had always believed that God's protection was stronger than any darkness. "Let me get my lantern," he said, disappearing inside for a moment. The journey into the forest was eerie. The old woman moved surprisingly fast for someone who needed a walking stick, and Thomas had to hurry to keep up. They walked deeper and deeper into the forest, way past the paths that villagers usually visited. After what seemed like hours, they came to a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the middle lay a young girl on a bed of leaves. She looked about 16 or 17, and even in the dim light, Thomas could see she was extraordinarily beautiful, with skin that seemed to glow like polished ebony. But something was wrong, very wrong. The girl was completely still, barely breathing, and her body was covered in strange markings that looked like they had been painted with white chalk. The old woman knelt beside her and touched her forehead. "She needs the sacred bath," the old woman said. "Only you can perform it, Pastor. Only you can save her." Thomas hesitated. He had performed many healing rituals before, but something about this felt different. The air around them seemed to buzz with an energy he couldn't explain. "What kind of bath?" he asked. The old woman reached into a bag and pulled out 7 calabashes, each filled with different colored waters: red, blue, green, white, yellow, purple, and black. "You must bathe her with the sacred waters in the right order while praying over her. But there are rules, Pastor. Important rules." She held up her wrinkled fingers as she listed them. "First, you must complete the bath before the moon sets. Second, you must use all 7 waters in the exact order I tell you. Third, and most important, you must not stop once you begin, no matter what you see or hear. Do you understand?" Thomas nodded, though his heart was pounding. He had learned about many traditional healing practices since becoming a pastor in this village, but this was something new entirely. The old woman arranged the calabashes in a circle around the girl and instructed Thomas on the order. Start with the white water, then yellow, green, blue, purple, red, and finally the black water. Each time you must pour it over her while praying, starting from her head down to her feet. As Thomas picked up the first calabash of white water, the old woman stepped back into the shadows of the trees. Remember, Pastor, her voice called out, don't stop no matter what you see. The girl's life depends on it. Taking a deep breath, Thomas began the ritual. He poured the white water first, praying as it flowed over the girl's still form. Nothing happened. The yellow water followed, then the green. With each pour, Thomas felt the air growing thicker, heavier, with that strange energy. When he poured the blue water, the girl's body twitched slightly. During the purple water, her fingers began to move. With the red water, her chest started rising and falling more visibly. Thomas's hands were shaking as he picked up the final calabash containing the black water. As soon as the black water touched her skin, the girl's eyes flew open. They were the most unusual eyes Thomas had ever seen. They seemed to shift colors like an opal in the moonlight. She sat up suddenly, water running down her body, washing away the white markings. But when Thomas saw it, and his blood turned to ice in his veins, behind her, partially hidden by her long hair, was something impossible. Something that made him question everything he believed in. The girl had a tail, a long, scaled tail that curled around her body like a snake. He wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to flee, but he remembered the old woman's warning. He couldn't stop until the ritual was complete. With trembling hands, he continued pouring the black water, watching as the tail seemed to shimmer and move in the moonlight. The girl turned to look at him, and her face was both beautiful and terrifying. She smiled, revealing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp to be human. "Thank you, Pastor Thomas," she said, her voice melodious and strange, like music played on unknown instruments. How do you know my name?" he stammered. Her smile widened. "Oh, I know many things about you, Pastor Thomas. Many, many things." She stood up gracefully, her tail moving with her like a dance. "And now, you're part of our story." Thomas looked around frantically for the old woman, but she was nowhere to be seen. The clearing seemed different now. The trees closer, more menacing, their branches reaching toward them like grasping hands. "Where is the old woman?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girl laughed, and the sound echoed through the forest like bells. "What old woman, Pastor Thomas? I came to your door myself tonight. Don't you remember?" Thomas felt his world tilt sideways. He clearly remembered the old woman at his door, but now the memory seemed to shift and change in his mind like smoke. Had it been the girl all along? Had he been enchanted somehow? "What are you?" he managed to ask. The girl moved closer to him, her tail leaving patterns in the wet earth. "I am many things, Pastor Thomas. I am a blessing and a curse. I am a test and a gift. But most importantly," she paused, her color-shifting eyes boring into his, "I am your responsibility now." "What do you mean?" "The sacred bath binds us together. You saved my life, and now I belong to your church. I will come every Sunday, sit in your congregation, and we'll see how good a pastor you really are." Her smile held secrets that made Thomas's skin crawl. "But don't worry, I'll hide my tail well. Nobody will know what I am, unless you tell them. And you won't tell them, will you, Pastor Thomas?" Thomas wanted to protest, to say that he would tell everyone about this strange and frightening encounter, but something in her eyes told him that would be a terrible mistake. "No," he heard himself say. "I won't tell anyone." "Good," she purred, "because if you do..." She left the threat hanging in the air like a sword. Suddenly there was a rustle in the bushes, and Thomas turned toward the sound. When he looked back, the girl was gone. The clearing was empty except for the 7 empty calabashes scattered on the ground. Had it all been a dream? But no, his clothes were wet from the sacred waters, and there in the soft earth were the distinctive marks left by her tail. As he stumbled back toward the village in the fading moonlight, Pastor Thomas felt the weight of what had just happened settling over him like a heavy blanket. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but he knew with terrible certainty that his life would never be the same. The sun was just beginning to rise as he reached his house, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, he would need to ring the church bell for morning prayers, just like any other day. But now he would be watching, waiting to see if she would really come. The girl with the tail. And somewhere in the forest, in the growing light of dawn, something laughed, a sound like silver bells and breaking glass. The next Sunday arrived with a mixture of dread and anticipation for Pastor Thomas. His hands trembled as he rang the morning bell, each toll echoing across Mokonde village like a countdown to something inevitable. As the congregants began filing into the church, his eyes darted to each face, searching for the mysterious girl. She arrived last, just as the opening hymn began. Thomas almost dropped his Bible when he saw her. She wore a flowing yellow dress that reached her ankles, completely hiding any trace of her tail. Her hair was braided elaborately with golden beads that caught the sunlight streaming through the church windows. She looked so normal, so human, that for a moment Thomas wondered if that night in the forest had been nothing but a fever dream. But then she smiled at him, that same knowing smile with slightly too sharp teeth, and his heart nearly stopped. The girl introduced herself to the congregation as Grace, saying she was new to the village and looking for a spiritual home. The villagers welcomed her warmly, especially the young men who couldn't take their eyes off her beauty. She sat in the front row, directly in Pastor Thomas's line of sight, making it nearly impossible for him to concentrate on his sermon. Throughout the service, strange things began to happen. The candles on the altar flickered wildly, though there was no wind. The choir's voices seemed to harmonize in impossible ways when Grace joined in the singing. And most disturbing of all, every time Pastor Thomas looked at her, her eyes would be shifting colors like kaleidoscopes. After the service, Grace joined the women's prayer group, charming everyone with her sweet voice and seemingly deep knowledge of scripture. But she quoted verses Thomas had never heard before, verses that made the older women uncomfortable, though they couldn't explain why. Days turned into weeks, and Grace became a fixture in the church community. She volunteered for every activity, helped with the children's Sunday school, and even started a new choir group that practiced late into the night. Their songs could be heard throughout the village, beautiful but strange melodies that gave people unusual dreams. But Thomas noticed troubling changes in his congregation. The young men who admired Grace began fighting among themselves, each claiming she had promised to court them. Women who had been friends for years started having mysterious feuds. Children who attended her Sunday school classes began speaking in riddles and drawing peculiar symbols in the dirt. One evening, Mama Zelo, the village's oldest resident, came to Pastor Thomas in secret. "That girl is not what she seems," Mama Zelo whispered, her ancient eyes full of worry. My grandmother told me stories about her kind. They're called the Nachalo, shape-shifting creatures that attach themselves to places of worship. They feed on faith and discord in equal measure. Thomas felt his mouth go dry. What do they want? To test the strength of religious leaders, Mama Zelo replied, "If the pastor stays true to his faith and resists their influence, they eventually leave. But if the pastor falters..." She left the sentence unfinished, making the sign of the cross. "How do I make her leave?" Thomas asked desperately. "You must expose her true nature in front of the entire congregation. But be careful, the Nachalo are clever. They always find ways to twist things to their advantage." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He spent hours reading his Bible, searching for guidance. Around midnight, he heard singing coming from the church. Following the sound, he found Grace standing at the altar. But she wasn't alone. Dancing around her were shadowy figures, not quite human, not quite animal, all moving to her hypnotic song. "Join us, Pastor Thomas," Grace called out, her tail now visible and swaying like a charmed snake. "Your faith is strong, but imagine how much stronger it could be if you embrace the old ways too. The ways before missionaries came with their rigid rules, the ways that understood that spirit and flesh, divine and earthly, could dance together." For a moment, Thomas felt tempted. The shadows seemed to whisper promises of power and knowledge beyond his wildest dreams. But then he remembered his calling, his true purpose as a servant of God. "No," he said firmly, "this must end." Grace's beautiful face transformed into something ancient and terrible. "Then end it, if you dare. But remember, who will believe you? The respected pastor who claims one of his most devoted members is a monster. They'll think you've gone mad." She was right, Thomas realized. He needed proof, something undeniable. That's when he remembered the sacred waters from the first night. Each calabash had left distinct marks on Grace's skin before revealing her true form. If he could recreate that. The next Sunday, Thomas prepared 7 bottles of holy water, each blessed with different prayers. He announced there would be a special blessing ceremony for all church members. One by one, the congregants came forward to receive the water. When it was Grace's turn, her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Trust me," Thomas said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is just a blessing, like the one that saved your life that night in the forest." Grace couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. As Thomas poured the first water over her head, he began praying loudly, reciting the same prayers from that moonlit night. By the third pouring, Grace's skin began to shimmer strangely. By the fifth, her carefully maintained human form began to waver. The congregation watched in horror as Grace's true form emerged. Her tail burst through her dress, her eyes blazed with otherworldly colors, and her shadow multiplied into those dancing, inhuman shapes. But instead of running away screaming, Grace threw back her head and laughed. The sound shattered every window in the church and made the walls tremble. "Oh, clever pastor," she said, her voice echoing with multiple tones. "You've exposed me, yes, but look around. Look what you've done to your precious church." Thomas turned to see his congregation, but instead of fear, he saw fascinating on their faces. Some were reaching out toward Grace as if mesmerized. Others were swaying to an unheard rhythm. They've been mine for weeks now, Grace explained. Every song we sang, every lesson I taught, every dream I sent, it all prepared them for this moment. They're ready to embrace a different kind of faith now. The question is, Pastor Thomas, are you? Thomas looked at his congregation. People he had known and served for years, now transformed by Grace's influence. But among them, he spotted Mama Zelo, her eyes clear and knowing. She gave him a slight nod. Understanding flooded through him. This wasn't just a test of his faith. It was a test of his leadership, his ability to shepherd his flock through darkness. "You're right," he said to Grace. "I've been afraid of you, trying to drive you away." But that's not what a true pastor does. A true pastor faces darkness and shines light into it. He began to pray, not the rigid prayers of his training, but prayers that came from his heart, prayers that acknowledged both light and shadow, prayers that embraced mystery while standing firm in faith. As he prayed, something remarkable happened. The congregants began to wake from their trance, not with fear or shock, but with understanding. They joined their pastor in prayer, their voices rising in a harmony that matched Grace's otherworldly songs, but transformed them into something new. Grace's form began to change again, but this time it was different. Her tail remained, but it no longer seemed menacing. Just another part of God's mysterious creation. "You understand now," she said, her voice gentle. "I am not here to destroy faith, but to deepen it. Every church needs a reminder that God's creation is vast and mysterious. Every pastor needs to learn that true faith doesn't fear the unknown." From that day forward, the Church of Mokonde became known throughout the region as a place where faith and mystery danced together. Grace remained, no longer hiding her true nature, teaching the children stories of both heaven and earth. Her songs still gave people strange dreams, but now they were dreams of hope and possibility. As for Pastor Thomas, he never again saw faith as something simple or straightforward. In the girl with the tail, he had found not an enemy to be banished, but a teacher who showed him that true spiritual leadership means embracing all of God's creation, even its strangest and most mysterious parts. And on quiet nights, when the moon is full, people say you can still hear Grace singing in the church, her voice carrying through the village like a reminder that beyond our understanding, beyond our fears, beyond even our faith, there is always more mystery waiting to be discovered.